Welcome. Tonight we're going to be exploring difference and its importance or otherwise within Aikido. And I can't think of a better way of doing that than exploring how difference is so obvious when we step on the mat. In this session, we're very regularly blessed with one person who's blind. And so most people would just say, well, what's a blind person doing martial arts? Two people that are in wheelchairs. And again, the typical response will be, there's no place for someone in a wheelchair on a martial arts mat. And one person who suffers from rheumatoid arthritis got really badly and spends a lot of time in a wheelchair as well. So if this isn't the place to explore difference, I don't know what is. And I thought we would focus our attention on Steve, who is the blind gentleman, and find out a little bit more about him and see what difference that's made on his Aikido journey. And then I'm going to open it up to you all to add to the conversation. So Steve's been blind since birth, and I've known him quite a long time now. I would say it must be 15 years or something like that, possibly longer. When I first heard that there was this blind teacher, so he not only was a student, he was teaching people as well, it sounded really bizarre, and that was something I had to go and see. So I made contact and I went to visit Steve, and we've kind of been getting together for a long while now. And in the end, Steve closed his dojo and has been coming all the way to my dojo, which is quite a trek actually from Norwich, for the last 5, 6, 7 years, I would think. So I've got to experience what it's like to teach somebody who's blind, which is again a different experience, and learn from somebody who's blind too, because there's a wealth of knowledge in somebody who's practiced martial arts for 50 odd years, which is what Steve's done. So Steve, tell me how you ended up going into martial arts in the first place.
When I was at school, I was one of the small people because I was prematurely born, and I was very small, and my dad was concerned that I would be bullied.
So jetzt warte mal.
Yeah, okay. So why did he send you off to martial arts? Did he think it would make a difference? Oh, hang on, Steve. You seem to be muted all of a sudden. Best if I unmute you, I think. You're muted, Steve. Can you unmute yourself? Session's just not going to be the same if you don't.
Can't you unmute all, Quet?
No, I now have to ask them to unmute, which is a bit weird. I tried that.
How come I'm the only one who didn't get muted then?
Because I know that you can be quiet. Sorry to you others who I muted.
I'll try that one.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Okay, so your dad sent you off. Did you start with Aikido?
No, I started with judo.
Okay.
And I did reasonably well until up to the age of 20-ish. And then I stopped it because I couldn't be in competition the same as sighted people, which is utterly crazy. Could you go along to a judo club to train with sighted people? And it was judo for the blind, and I said, no way, that's it.
So let me put people in up to bring them up to speed. Steve trained not in a special place with blind people. He trained in a normal club with normal people, and then suddenly they sort of segregated them and said, "Oh no, it should be Aikido for the blind." Steve, you got to a fairly serious level, didn't you?
Yeah.
What grade did you get to?
I got 4th Dan in BJC and 4th Dan in BJA.
Right. And
but then I had to take some of the grades again because of the age when I changed age bit.
Right.
Move up. But in competition, I stopped winning. So I decided to go into coaching side of it.
Okay. But you were actually practicing. You remember people like Steve Starbrook who got into the Olympics and won medals and stuff? He was practicing with Olympians, not just any people. Steve was actually practicing with Olympians. So he got pretty serious.
I used to know Brian Jack quite well,
right.
and Dave Starbrook, Keith Rentfrey, Anton Gusink, and one or two others. Now they do go back a few years, but that was mainly what that was about in those competitive time. But I always enjoyed the open category because any weight, and I was in for anything,
Right. So in your own mind, did you consider yourself disadvantaged?
No, I'm the same as anybody else. I just don't see.
Right. Did you think you had an advantage in some ways?
It's an advantage because people start to hold back or underestimate. So I used to just draw them in and over the top because I was small. And I kept away from the ground because I knew I'd be beaten on the ground. So therefore I'd spend more time throwing.
Fantastic. Okay, so you got to this serious level and then you decided judo, maybe not anymore. You didn't like the sort of segregationist attitude. And how did you find your way into Aikido then?
I found that by asking questions. I'd heard about it and I'd always wanted to do something that didn't involve actual competitive fighting. And unfortunately, at that time, judo wasn't taught to the very young, Aikido wasn't taught to the very young as it is today. So it's very different.
Okay, so I know that you were sitting on the side of mats when you were a little lad and you weren't allowed to train. You could just kind of pick up what you could from being at the side of the mat. I'm intrigued to know what you did pick up when you couldn't actually see what was going on.
Well, it was very, very difficult, but a lot of the students used to help me after class and some of them during class to show me what was happening. Because I always learned by uke when I used to do from actual doing. So if you uke, any course I used to go on, I'd try and uke as often as possible.
Okay. So, but you didn't actually start practicing Aikido till what, your 20s, because you was doing judo for that time?
That's right. 72, I stopped judo totally.
Right.
Because I just had enough. Even then, there's a lot of internal politics and stuff, but it didn't interest me.
Right.
So
did you immediately segue into Aikido, or was there a bit of a gap?
Gradual. I started with, I knew they had about weapons, but being blind, I didn't understand what a knife was, a sword, or a jo. So I found the people at the Budokai and various other places who would show me the weapons and let me try to learn what they were about. So I learned sticks first. In other words, learning techniques of the stick, which I was very fortunate to get a master's for that. And then I took on the bokan and tanto, and even I still learn every time you hold one. You still got to learn.
Right.
But the times I got hit was incredible amount of times. But you know,
So there was no holding back then.
no, not as you with certain instructors. I tell you.
So did it knock any sense into you, or did it knock it out of you?
It made me more determined to not be hit, so I had to learn.
Right.
And I thought my first main aikido lesson was with Tamura,
Right.
and he all he said to me was, relax, okay, and learn. He said, I'm not changing the aikido for you. I won't change the aikido. You just do the same as everybody else.
Right.
You know, otherwise it doesn't become, you know, if you lose the principles, you're not doing aikido.
Right. So was that a sort of novel attitude that you had been accepted properly for the first time?
What the attitude?
Yeah, Tamura's attitude of, yeah, come on, but you do it the same as everybody else, treating you like everybody else. Was that a novel experience or something that you were used to?
It was different. I really wanted to be like everybody else, but it's finding a way to not be different and yet be myself.
Right. Okay. So you've told me many times that you went on many courses and felt, why did I bother turning up, because nobody would practice with you, etc. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, many courses. This is what I was talking about the other week when John was a good teacher too. He was one of the first people to teach blind people.
That's just as well you said that, because he is on this call, so he'll be quite grateful that you said that.
Yeah.
Carry on.
But the thing is, he's I used to go to a summer school, and about 90% that time I wasn't on the mat because I couldn't understand what was going on. And it was frustrating, but it just, why change anything? Just show somebody.
Right.
Just show them what they're doing. And
So
I just couldn't.
So what they would teach in what we'll say a traditional manner, they would show and then they'd expect you to do it. And obviously that would be a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Yes, that was a problem anyway.
Yeah. And you didn't have anybody who would then step up to you and say that this is what he did.
I eventually got students who I knew over time.
Right.
And they would translate whilst the demonstration was going on.
Right.
But even then we got told not to talk, so you couldn't win, whichever way. But I had a lot of help, and over the years with that type of thing. Even today, it just shown me what to do, and I'm quite happy and learned from it, you know.
Sure. So in the end, you rose up through the ranks, and at what point did you decide, hey, I'm going to go and teach this stuff?
Just after I got Shodan, I was very fortunate, and that took quite a few years, and I was very lucky. And I thought, well, I want to show respect, and I want to be able to put back the things that I'd learned and try to teach others Aikido. And that took a long time to take a broken dojo, which was in all different things for political reasons. So I had half a dozen students, and I took most of them up And most of them got first dan minimum, and I think one or two have got second and third. But it's taken a lot of patience and time to do this. And as you say, the question that most people ask me, how can you teach if you can't see? And I say, well, come on the mat and I'll show you exactly what needs to be done, you know.
So
But it has,
as we can't be shown onto the mat and show you, would you like to tell people a little bit about how you would deal with teaching people that you can't see?
it's what I would normally do, demonstrate and show people, and then go round to each one throughout that session to check and find out exactly what they were doing, and just gently correct or try to make it easier for the person to do that. I wouldn't change the aikido if I had a class of blind people. I wouldn't change the aikido. I'd change, that would be the same.
Right.
The difference is how I put that into a way that can be understood by blind people or by wheelchair users. Because if you're in a wheelchair, you develop your own way. As long as the principles are there, as I say, you develop your own way of doing it.
Right.
And the same as when you can't see it, it's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
The hardest thing I found is to get rid of competitiveness.
Is
Meaning,
that within yourself or within your club?
well, coming from a judo background, it was win at all costs, and that takes a long time to come from a sport to a martial art. And that, once I came out of that, then I could teach because I was free. I was free to teach. I knew that it didn't matter who won what, it didn't matter. Just because you can throw somebody in the mat all evening doesn't mean that you're any good.
So was there anything particularly that happened that allowed you to kind of break through that barrier?
As a teacher, yeah, it's people, I think I became hard because I wanted to get my point through to people that I think I hardened. And it's only over the last, I would say, 6, 7 years that I started to soften down. Even after all that time, you know, and it's, as you say, very important that the mind goes first in to be able to control the body and so on, so it becomes one. Once you do that, you're free.
Right. Okay.
You're totally free, aren't you, to teach?
You are. So I think what Steve's shown us is that blindness didn't particularly get in the way. So he got to 4th dan and trained with Olympians at judo. He became a cane master. He's risen to 5th dan in aikido. I happen to know he plays in a band with a saxophone and makes some money out of that. He ran his own business, a private investigation agency, and he plays golf to a pretty high standard too, or at least he did in his day, which I just is boggling when I look at my own standard of golf. I just can't believe he did. So being different didn't hinder him at all. I'd like to just open it up at this point. Do any of you have any particular questions you would like to ask Steve? If you're muted, obviously you'll have to unmute. Or are you all stunned into silence? Finn.
I'm just really curious about the way that, Steve, you sense Yuki and sense the space and sense about what's actually happening. I think that in my own learning and in learning and working with other learners, it's all about which feet you move, what position you get into, with not so much emphasis on the space and the sense of what's actually happening the connection. So how do you understand or make sense of that connection, and is that different for you, do you think, than for other learners?
Steve,
could that be translated?
yes, he's basically saying, how do you judge distance and when you need to move when you can't see the person in front of you?
And particularly the sense of connection.
And how what does connection mean in your particular world?
Right. Okay. The energy field, it does take that's the hardest part of Aikido for a blind person. I would imagine it's the same for sighted people, to read people's movement. You have to connect the mind, body, and movement together. So therefore, it practice, and more practice until it becomes instinctive.
Right. So
because when Quentin or anybody in our club does randori with me, I think Jacqueline found out that too, that I don't hang about. You're gone. That's it. You might get a blow in, but that's about all you would get, because that's, it's a freedom of movement to feel, to get into that energy field, the same as somebody else,
Piers, I wonder if you, I practice with Steve all the time, so I wonder if you, but you don't get that pleasure every week. I wonder if you could comment on what you've found when you've practiced with Steve.
Sure. Just before I say that, it's very interesting, because what you're saying is that Steve is different, but actually we're different from Steve. So Steve can see it. It's a completely different perspective. We're thinking he's different, but actually he's looking at us and he's thinking in his head, we're all bloody different. And actually it's different perspective.
Okay,
anyway,
so the end game here is that we're all different.
Exactly.
It's just some people are more obviously different. And so exploring that difference is a good thing, at least I think it probably is a good thing, is where we're aiming. There, yeah, I've given the end game away here.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Sorry to blow the punchline. I really, the more I've practiced with Steve and the more I've experienced Steve, the more I'm impressed. Not less than when he taught at the our own ADL AGM, when he made half the class blind by putting masks over our eyes, and we had to become either the uke or the tori and perform. And I was so impressed with that class that I immediately went back to my own dojo, bought a load of masks, closed all the curtains, turned all the lights out, and we practiced in the same vein. And it was so illuminating, which is an interesting word to use about that class. But we learned so much. And then when Steve came on, if you remember a little while back, we had a high grade class where you took one room and I took the weapons class. And it's what amazes me is just how Steve does not appear to have a disability, in the common parlance of the word, because he is completely aware that you're there. And it's like practicing almost with just a normal Aikido person, because his awareness is so great.
Yeah. Tim.
Quentin.
Yeah, that taken years to do that.
Yeah, but you make it look easy, Steve. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but then you embarrass me at the same time. So it's, I'm just the same as anybody else, and we're all the same. So
we're all the same and we're all different.
It's as simple as that.
Quentin.
Liz.
We're all different because.
Yeah. Hi, Steve. It's your mate Liz here.
She's got no wine on this occasion.
No. We've actually been talking quite a lot separately via Facebook Messenger and so on. So, Steve has got fantastic things to share with us. And this thinking about sensing the energy field, this sort of Piers and Quentin, you'll recognise that this was what we were taught in Ki Aikido. Yeah. And quite a difficult thing to do, isn't it? You've got your eyes closed, and then you have to sense when someone's come within striking distance. And if you can actually tune out the visual things that you normally rely on, you can genuinely sense it. But as a sighted person, I struggle with that for a long time, because the default is to rely on your eyes. And if your eyes aren't there, you rely on your ears. And it's not until you stop relying on both your eyes and your ears that you really feel what's happening and can genuinely deal with what's coming at you. And interesting enough, a long time ago, I started out doing traditional karate, a very long time ago. And my traditional karate sensei used to make us practice on a regular basis, blindfolded. He'd blindfold you and put you in a circle of people and have them all jump on you, which was always a bit sort of startling the first time it happened. But he used to explain it that you couldn't really understand what was going on if you relied on your eyes. And when people said to him, what's the point about doing this? He said, the day that you're defending yourself in pitch darkness, you'll find out why I've taught you this. So anyway, so that's it. Fantastic. Thanks, Steve.
Finn, did you have a point?
Just exploring that a bit further, I just wondered if you could say a bit more about what that energy field is, what that key is. Is it just, could it be oral awareness or touch awareness of movement, or is it something more spiritual than that?
It beyond that in a way. It's all different senses one uses. For example, as I said the other week, if you go into a kitchen and you leave a hot plate on, you will feel the heat first and then see the hot plate, hopefully, before you see the hot, And it's the same with anything changes in a room, I can feel it happening.
So I'll give you, for instance, I went with Steve up to do our National Association course, and we were practicing in a very large sports hall, which down one side had a mirror the whole way down the length of the wall. And when we walked into the hall, Steve said, "Oh my God, this is such a weird feeling. All this energy is bouncing back at me. Yeah. Is there a mirror on the wall?" It kind of blew my mind. And, the first time I met him, he somehow, it always felt like he had his eyes on me when I was approaching him. He always seemed to know when I was coming. And he always tells me he knows if it's me or it's Piers. So there's kind of an energy sense, which I'm not sure he can always put into words, but he has an awareness that most of us have limited our skills on. Let's just put it that way.
I didn't like that place at all.
No, but you knew there was something weird about it. That's the point.
Yeah.
Okay. So Paul, you could say that you too. Many people would say, "Well, look at this little 70-year-old old man who's got Parkinson's. Who's he to teach martial arts?" What's your take?
Well, it depends what you mean by martial arts. Well, I had, as most of you know, I had Lyme disease a few weeks ago, and it really put me out on top of the Parkinson's. But what I applied from the martial arts, I'd say yes, and I would force myself to be able to move. Otherwise, I would have stayed stuck on the floor. That's martial art. There's everything that will basically try to beat us down. We have to fight against, not in the negative sense of fighting, but you have to marshal your will. You have to do what needs to be done, or you give up and you don't do anything. I learned that from martial arts. I don't think fighting is that interesting, except as a metaphor. And it puts you in the place where you have to understand what's going on. If you think you can do something and you can't, you'll find out very quickly. And if you get all tied up in knots because you're not as good as you wish you were, or as you like to think you are, it doesn't work. You're only as good as you are. So I think the martial arts are not about competition. They aren't for me. I think there are three elements in the martial arts: spiritual, if you want to call it that, competition, and combat. And I think that you can't get all three, I think, out of the same art, because the two of them you can, but the third will be very different, whichever the third is. So I think of Aikido as primarily combative and self-growth, learning. And that's the martial art for me. I don't get into fights, but except verbally, of course. But that's the old philosophy major coming out.
Mm.
Does that make sense as an approach to Aikido and what martial arts could be?
Yes. But have you felt at times that you because you're not big and macho and the traditional vision of what a martial artist might look like, that's been a disadvantage?
No, not at all. Never occurred to me. I grew up in a situation where I was always told that I couldn't do things, that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, etc., etc. And I don't know why it didn't beat me down, but my basic feeling of, well, fuck you, I can do what I want my way. And so I did. It never occurred to me that I couldn't, but I did know that other people thought I couldn't.
Fantastic. So I think we've got two examples, and I could go on to Vitali, who's sitting in a wheelchair there, and probably we'd get the same story. Difference is good. So let's explore why difference is good. How does that help us learn in Aikido? So this is where I'm going to open up, and we can just try and tick them off one by one. Why difference is helpful?
Because if it were all the same, you wouldn't have anything to learn.
Right.
Yeah.
We'd all become little robots, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree totally.
Okay, carry on. Why is difference useful? Linda, I can tell you're going for it. No?
Because it reflects real life, Quentin, doesn't it?
I was just trying to get my Bluetooth headset working. You were all sounding garbled. I'll catch on.
No, you're right, Liz. Yes, it does reflect life. So if I think of some of the times where I've learned the most on the mat and off it, actually, it's usually where something substantially different from the norm has happened. Is that not the case for all of you too? Joanna?
I was thinking some experiences on the mat and off the mat when I was practicing, or just like having an experience with people with these differences. We really have to pay attention. It's not that with other people, like normal people, I wouldn't pay attention, but sometimes we act normally and randomly with other ones without really paying attention. I can't remember the word, but there was a class that Jamie taught a while ago, and she brought a word in Hebrew that like it was paying attention with all your heart. It's put your attention on it. So the few times that we had people with some disabilities in our dojos, it was like I really have to pay attention what I'm doing with these people, but it's not a reason that I shouldn't really pay attention with when I was practicing with my other partners at the dojo.
Oh. So. But it's a kind of wake-up call, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 Well, what is normal?
Well, very good question, Steve.
Exactly.
Renata, yes.
I just wanted to say that normal is for me, first of all, a part of my size and about my strength. This is normal for me. And maybe about my speed. And when I've got people who are different from me, and after all, also in addition, different from each other. For example, we've got somebody in our dojo, he's 2.5 heads taller than me. And we've got one man, he's extremely strong. And when I practice with really different uke as a nage, or even the other way around, but mainly that, I learn the principle, whilst when I practice only with someone very similar to me, I only learn movements.
Yeah, brilliantly said. Yeah, have we not all had that experience where we're practicing a technique and it's going brilliantly, it's absolutely top notch, then you move on to a new partner and suddenly it's
The
not
next
working
one.
at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, if you don't go through that variety of different things that go on in different bodies, you just don't learn as much, do you?
Yeah.
So has anybody else got any experiences they'd like to share? Otherwise, I'll share another experience. I had for a while, I had a young lady who I did private lessons for. She was autistic, and she literally could not bear to be in a room where there were too many people. The noise was just too overwhelming. I had to take the clock out of the room because the tick-tock of the clock would kind of drive her nuts as well. So that was a very, very different challenge in terms of teaching, because all the things that I would normally have done, I had to kind of throw out the window and find ways of getting the message across for her without overwhelming her or intimidating her, finding a pace that she was comfortable with and exercises that she could learn from. And the amazing thing was that, I mean, she really enjoyed it and she learned a lot. But boy, so did I. I learned a huge amount while I was practicing with her. And actually, in many ways, she was one of my best students. She picked up stuff much quicker than the rest because she didn't think conventionally. She just did go with the flow. It was a real treat, actually. Hard work in some levels, but it was really rewarding. Linda.
Hello. Sorry to join late. Good to see you all.
Oh, we're great. Have you here on Thanksgiving Day?
Thank you. We're being lazy about it. Being at home. Yeah, to pick up just said, my experience of training in the chess classes for years, I did about 8 years assisting in their children's program, that's a whole lot of different. Not only are the kids different from us, you know, they're physically different. They have to do things in a different way, and they're growing, so they change and they have to work with their own differences. But you know, they're very different from each other. There are some that are very sensitive and some that are like, oh, just try everything, and and you have to expand your range so much to work with them. You have to find new ways to explain things or show things, or you know, left and right doesn't work. Say, you know, your front foot, your back foot, whatever, left and right, half of them don't get it. And then you find out that half of adults probably don't get it either. So you know, you learn a lot, but the experience of working with so many people who are so different, it just, yeah, like expands your range. You have to grow in all directions to do it. It's a lot of fun.
So question for you, do you think that really adults are any different in being vastly different, or do they just mask it better?
I think they shut down a lot. I don't think adults are less different from each other than kids are. But there's a lot that, you know, kids have this range and adults have learned that like this part's okay to express. So, you know, you'll find and in my experience, it seems like adults add a whole lot of thinking about things. Like you said about your autistic student, you show a kid something and they'll be like, oh, you mean like this? You know, and they get it. They'll just try it. They'll have a go, you know. But as somebody said that in a TED talk, but the guy who talks about education, his name escapes me, but he talks about creativity and education. But I think adults tend to like, well, I better not do it. I'll do it wrong. You know, they very much limit themselves, keep themselves in a smaller, you know, once they can get comfortable, then they can, you know, if they're comfortable with a group, comfortable with the teacher, I think they can express a little more, but it may take a lot of time.
Yeah. So one of the dichotomies, I think, is that people generally don't like change. but how do you grow if you're not prepared to change? You know, you have to experience new things in order to develop. And both Piers and I, you know, we started off in the Key Federation of Great Britain, and we practiced there, in my case, for 17 years. I think of Piers, it would be something similar. And then we went off elsewhere, and suddenly we discovered there was a whole world of different Aikidos out there that did things in a completely different way. And we could have shut ourselves in a little box and just did do things the way we did, but we actually embraced it and went out. And I have to say, I think I speak for us both in saying that the learning went like that. It was just a fantastic experience to try other styles and see what other people had to offer. And that's just a bigger scale of practicing with different students, putting yourselves in situations where you're not automatically comfortable. That's when you can see when the principles actually work.
But also, Quentin, if you think about it, just look at nature. If you have a wide gene pool, you have a very healthy community. If you have a very narrow gene pool, you have weakness and illness and no strength.
Yes.
And it's just like nature. We need difference. It's essential to our well-being.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I both know of dojos that have kind of isolated themselves, and you see what they're doing get weaker and weaker and more stultifying, and the club often dies in the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Quentin,
Yeah.
I noticed many years ago, over the years when I've been managing people, you know, when I was a young manager, you sort of start off with the idea that there might be some set ways of doing things. But when you've managed teams for as long as I have, you rapidly discover that there are multiple solutions to anything you want to do. And any person you ask to do something will probably approach it in a different way to the next person, and they'll get equally good results. You know, there are multiple solutions to all the things that we do.
So one of the things Aikido should be good at is about helping us adapt to change and growing through that change. I'm going to ask Aaron, if I may, who has never done Aikido, but I know a little bit about his background. I know that you've had to change jobs a fair few times in the last few years. Has that been a good thing or a bad thing in terms of what you bring to your new employer?
Yeah, it's always good. I mean, I've worked for companies in a very established way for very long periods of time. And I worked one place for 15 years. And to be honest, once I moved out and tried another company, to be honest, I didn't realize there's other ways to do the same task. You get in a set pattern, a set style. And yeah, there has been enlightening situations for me when I've changed jobs by doing doing the same job but in a different style, different way. Yeah, it's been a benefit, and it's one of those things that, yes, you do have stability working in the same place, same style, but once you've tried something else, you look back and think, I've been stagnant. You know, I needed to test myself at times.
So fair enough to say probably challenging and uncomfortable at times, but huge benefit in the end.
Exactly. Yeah, it does bring its rewards, but you gotta take the leap. You gotta have a go. You got to accept that you will fail at times, and learn from it.
Yeah.
But Quentin, there's also, I wanted to just reminded me. You said it. Have you ever had any experiences of difference? And I remember. Do you remember when we went up to Phil Smith's course, where it was the Aiki extensions, one of the first ones in the country?
Yeah.
And at one point we were partnered off with a different Aikidoka of roughly your level. And I was with this guy, I don't know, 5th or 6th Dan guy, really nice. And the task was, do one of your favorite techniques and then get the guy to do the technique to you. So I like Nikio. So I sort of classically got his hand like that, tucked it into my shoulder, did Nikio, boff, he went down. And then he did it from the inside. And I just absolutely hit the floor and went, that's brilliant. How did you do that? And it was just so different from my technique, but it was Nikio, and I loved it. And I think that's an example of how how difference is just wonderful and it's so exciting.
Yes, I agree. Anyone else got any little tales? John, you have been branching out and experiencing different things in recent times. Any thoughts?
Well, this is why well, not so many now, but there used to be a course going every month, or two or three courses every month that you could travel to, and you'd go out and you'd meet different people and different instructors. And there is a more or less a saying that if we all taught the same, it would be totally boring. So all instructors have their different personalities. I mean, I've trained with Steve, and he's got a totally different personality to the blind student that I got in my class. Incidentally, I've been on the receiving end also of Steve, and it's a bit difficult when you're halfway through the year and wondering how you're going to land. But this is what's different about when we used to go on courses. You met different people and you saw different ways of the techniques being applied, and you learned from it, and you grabbed a little bit of that and you put it in your portfolio to use.
Yeah. Yeah. So the message is, guys, that difference is to be celebrated, really, and sought out, because it just enhances your experience of life and your experience on the mat as well. But you know that for me, there's two interchangeable words, really.
Quentin, one quick thought, which is that our bodies change significantly throughout our lives, and the longer we practice, the more they change. And I think I've shared the story before of my hip replacement. But as when I first started Aikido, I was in my early 30s, and I was learning from scratch and sort of struggling with it a bit. But my body was fairly young and flexible, and it bounced off the walls and it rolled back up to its feet and things really well. And I sort of took that for granted. And then sort of a good 10, 20 years later, I developed a serious problem with my right hip, which has now been replaced. But one of the things that I'm interested is my body dynamics changed, and I didn't initially recognise that I had a disease, an actual disease. So my first symptom was I couldn't roll and get back to my feet anymore, and I was mentally beating myself up. How could you have got to third down and have forgotten how to roll and get back to your feet? Of course, I hadn't forgotten anything. It was my body had significantly changed. Yeah. Now I've learned to work around that now. I don't roll back to my feet anymore. I know that's gone because the left hip needs to be dealt with as well. But the point is that as my body significantly changed, my Aikido significantly changed. And actually, I went through a very tough period of having to relearn all of my Aikido exercises. Because when your hips change, everything changes. Everything.
Thank you. Natalia, can I open the mic up to you? Could you want to just unmute yourself for a second? Okay, so you've been in a situation where you were very able-bodied and fit. You were lifting weights and doing martial arts and all sorts of a thing, and then all of a sudden, life decided to hit you over the head with a hammer, and you developed MS. So how has it been for you coping with a very different perspective on life now? And what's it taught you?
Anyway, I prefer never stop. So I still I continued lifting weights and everything when I had it, because I realized that the only way for me to overcome, somehow to keep myself running, I have to do something. Otherwise, I never cared about nets. I tried everything. I tried different nets, and I had my bone marrow transplant and everything, but nothing helps. The only thing that helps is myself. So I did as you said, I did a lot of stuff during my life. I did different combat fights and all this street fight and everything, but being appeared to be not being able to do anything. I always liked and I looked at Aikido, and I was thinking, okay, this is what I would like to do later on. But when later on came, it appeared to be that I can't do that. And then one day I just met a teacher. He came to my house and I talked to him. And he said, okay, let's try to do that. And he started telling me and explaining to me all the principles and all the aikido stuff. And I'm really thankful to him, and I'm thankful to any teacher who does it, because they need to have a lot of patience. Because we sitting in the wheelchair, we think that we are normal people and we want to do this and that. It's so cool how it's done. We want to do the same. And right now, for example, if a new person rolls into the class and he wants to do this and that, and it really takes a lot challenging for teacher to explain, to find the way how to explain. For example, one day the guy without hand came for our class, and I was like, okay, here you go. Here's another challenge for you, how to explain, how to make him to do this technique or that technique. And our teacher is really great, and he helps. He's a student of Terry Azra, and he's really great. He takes all this and he thinks, he's using chairs and everything. He does a great job. So, but anyway, all this made me thinking a little bit different now, because before I was thinking about my physical stuff, but right now I'm more about inside and my thinking, my key energy, and I do qigong also, which helps a lot. So I'm trying different stuff. But the one thing I wanted to say that we want to be treated like normal people. We don't want to be treated differently.
Well, as we said, what is normal?
Yeah, you never know.
So I think the interesting thing for you is, or for me with you, is that you might have changed the direction, but the direction has been forward, forward, forward. And I wonder if you see actually that although there are obvious negatives about being in a wheelchair most of the time, that there have been things that you would have learned that you never would have learned if that hadn't happened.
I think maybe the things that I started to treat people differently.
Right.
Because I'm trying to, and maybe to feel more other people pain, also to have more sense to other people. And when they trying to do something, you try to understand why they're doing that, not just going just my way. I'm trying to accept everybody and to feel them.
So it's made you more empathetic.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And has that changed other aspects of your life as a result?
I would say a lot of things, like I do a lot of social work over here, so I'm trying to get attention because, being a person with disability in Russia, it's a really complicated thing, and we need to fight our way through. So because there's no ways to get access to any places you want, and there's no ramps or anything, and you have to help other people. And for example, in my home city, it's 44,000 people with disabilities. You can't see them in the street because one day they wanted to do something, they were told we don't have facilities for that. And that's what we're trying to do that, and we're trying. I myself trying to use aikido way to like we were talking about aikido in business. So we do the same right now. When I'm working with a local government or somebody else, when I'm talking to them and when they want to do nothing, and we are trying to negotiate all the time, and that also helps a lot. So I'm trying to use all my force to help other people. It's not like I'm doing just for myself. Like one day I told if I manage to pull one person out of their apartment and to do something. I would say I served this world, right? And I'm done with my mission, but right now we're trying to put some commercial on to get people out of their apartments and do something with their life to change it somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, what's wonderful is how you want to give back. And I think some people could become very bitter as a result of what's happened health-wise for you, but that's not been your reaction, and it's not Paul's reaction, and it's not Steve's reaction. I'm now almost feeling that maybe it takes something horrible to make you wake up and realize that you have a part to play in the world, and to give something back, which you all do, which is amazing. Guys, we're about on the hour. That was fairly wonderful for me. Very inspiring, just to see how taking on board differences can be so positive rather than resisting it. And that seems to me one of the central messages of Aikido. Never anticipate, just take what comes your way, provide an appropriate response. You can't control much. All you can do is make sure that you're ready. And that's what our practice is all about.
I've got something perhaps to end with.
Please do.
Life is a good news, bad news joke. The good news is that through pain and suffering, we gain wisdom. The bad news is that there's more good news coming.
I like that.
It's a Paul Linden classic. Absolutely.
Oh, by the way, if I've looked distracted at any point during this session, it's because I'm attacking them.
Don't worry. Cats are allowed to do that. Oh, we got another cat attacking.
He's a beautiful cat.
Okay, well, I'm going to love and leave you. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it, Aaron, and it was interesting. And enjoy your turkey, Linda, and Paul, if you're having one. And
Yes.
next week, we'll be looking at preparing to succeed.
Okay, that's good.
I'm parish counselling next week. So.
Okay, well, you'll just have to learn the wisdom after the event then.
I will. Okay.
Thank
Thank you very much, all. Thank you.
Bye,
Much
everyone.
appreciated.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Quentin. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.